John had never believed in fairy tales. He had grown up with the mundane, the ordinary, and the routine. His life consisted of waking up every morning to the same predictable cycle: work, eat, and sleep. He would meet friends on weekends for drinks and occasionally date women he had no intention of staying with. Nothing ever stuck. Nothing ever felt different. Nothing ever felt meaningful. But that all changed one fateful evening by the riverbank, under the full moon's cold gaze. It had been another one of those aimless nights, where the weight of a monotonous life bore down on him. He wandered away from the city, hoping the quiet would ease his frustrations. The river, dark and still, stretched before him like a forgotten memory. The sound of rushing water calmed him for a moment, but then, as if the night itself had conspired against him, he saw her. She was sitting on a rock by the edge of the river, bathed in silver moonlight. Her long, dark hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall, and her eyes were endless, like the ocean, pulling him in with an intensity he could not comprehend. She sang softly, a melody that seemed ancient, yet it spoke directly to his soul. John could hardly breathe as the music wrapped around him. It was as though the world had paused, waiting for him to make a move. With every step he took toward her, the air grew heavier with mystery. "Hello," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She turned to face him, and when their eyes met, his heart skipped a beat. Her smile was both enigmatic and inviting, an expression that held secrets he could never hope to understand. "Hello, stranger," she replied, her voice smooth, almost hypnotic. They sat together by the water, talking for hours as if they had known each other forever. She spoke of places he had never heard of times and histories that felt distant, almost unreal. Her words were mesmerizing, and yet, for all her knowledge, there was something timeless about her, something beyond human. As the night wore on, he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her. When she suggested they stay together for the night, he didn't hesitate. What was one more night of escape from his dull, predictable life? That night was unlike anything he had ever experienced. In her presence, he felt alive in a way he hadn't known was possible. Their connection was magnetic, irresistible. As dawn broke, he woke to find himself alone in her absence, but there, under his pillow, was a stack of bills. John stared at the money in disbelief. It was real. He could feel the crisp paper between his fingers. It was far more than he could have ever earned in a week. Had she left it for him? Why? Confused but intrigued, he decided to say nothing, unsure if he was just imagining things or if something more was happening. Night after night, Marina returned. Each time, the same thing happened. She would disappear by morning, and each time, he would find more money under his pillow. His financial situation began to improve dramatically. The debts he had once struggled with vanished, and he bought new clothes, new things, anything he could never have afforded before. It was as though he had unlocked a new life, one filled with possibilities he hadn't dared dream of. But the mystery gnawed at him. Where was the money coming from? Why was it happening to him? It wasn't long before he confided in his two closest friends, Mike and Tom. They had known John for years, through all his ups and downs. Surely they would have some insight into what was happening. One evening, they gathered at his apartment, drinking and chatting as usual. As the night went on, John broached the topic that had been weighing heavily on his mind. "Guys, I've been seeing this woman, Marina, and every time she stays over, I wake up to find money under my pillow." "It's real, I swear," John said, trying to sound casual. Mike raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like something out of a fairy tale." "I know it sounds crazy, but it's true," John said, pulling out a stack of cash from a drawer. "Look, it keeps happening." Tom examined the money closely, his fingers lingering over the bills. "It looks real," he said slowly, But how do we know you're not messing with us? I'm not messing with you, John insisted. I don't know how, but it's real. Why don't you stay over and see for yourself? Reluctantly, Tom agreed to spend the night. They all went out for dinner, and when they returned late, Marina wasn't there. John assured Tom the money would still appear, and, skeptical but curious, Tom agreed to sleep in the guest room while John took the couch. The next morning, Tom was the first to wake. As he stretched, his hand brushed against something under the pillow. His eyes widened as he pulled out a stack of bills. John, look at this, he shouted, disbelief written all over his face. John smiled, his own surprise barely contained. See? I told you. Mike, who had heard the commotion, came into the room. His expression shifted from skepticism to shock as he saw the money. Okay, that's impressive, Mike admitted. But where is it coming from? And why? John shook his head, just as bewildered. I don't know, but it happens every time she stays over. The three of them spent the rest of the day discussing various theories. Maybe Marina was a secret millionaire, they joked. Perhaps she was connected to some wealthy benefactor. Maybe she had a hidden stash of cash she was giving him for some unknown reason. But the more they talked, the more unsettling the mystery became. None of their theories made sense, and yet the evidence was right there in front of them. Unbeknownst to them, Marina had been listening to every word. Her heart weighed heavily with guilt, for she knew the truth. She wasn't just an ordinary woman, she was a mermaid, bound to the river by a curse. The money wasn't just a gift, it was the cost of her survival. Each night she spent with John, she drained a portion of his vitality, his glory, and transferred it into wealth. The more she took, the more powerful she became, but the more it cost him. She had no choice. If she didn't feed off his life force, she would lose her human form and return to the depths of the river, where she would remain trapped forever. John's increasing reliance on her and the wealth she provided was both a blessing and a curse. She had grown fond of him, more than she had intended, but she knew that the longer the arrangement continued, the more she would take from him until there was nothing left. As time passed, John's life changed beyond recognition. He quit his job, confident that the money would always be there to support him. He bought a luxury car, a mansion, and began investing in business ventures, living a life that most people only dreamed of. The wealth seemed endless, but it wasn't enough for Marina. She needed more from him, and he had no idea. The consequences of their bond became more apparent when Marina began to distance herself. She couldn't bear the guilt of what she was doing, but she couldn't stop either. John noticed the changes in her behavior. She seemed colder, more distant. Her eyes, once filled with warmth and mystery, now held an air of regret. But he didn't understand. To him, everything was going perfectly. Why would he question something so perfect? One evening, after another night together, John awoke to find the money under his pillow as usual, but this time, he also found a note. It was brief, written in elegant handwriting. I must leave you now. There is nothing more I can give. Confused and anxious, John tried to reach out to her, but she was gone. For the first time since they had met, Marina disappeared without a trace. John felt an emptiness he couldn't explain. The money was still there, but something crucial was missing. In the days that followed, the wealth slowly began to dwindle. The money under his pillow grew scarcer, and soon, it stopped altogether. His newfound business ventures crumbled, and the life he had once taken for granted began to unravel. Without Marina, without her magic, his riches vanished, and he was left with nothing but the empty shell of a life he no longer recognized. As John sat alone in his mansion, staring out at the river, the full weight of the situation hit him. Marina had given him everything, but in return, she had taken something far more valuable. And now, without her, he was just a man, one who had gambled with forces he could never understand. But it was too late to turn back. His world had changed, and so had he. In the end, he realized that the price of a life lived in luxury was far greater than he had ever imagined. The fortune she had given him was nothing more than a hollow gift, one that came with a cost he would never escape.